The woman who once stood at Jeff Bezos' side may have just pulled the biggest betrayal in billionaire history. And what happened next shocked even his closest circle. It started with whispers on Wall Street, quiet murmurs in private trading rooms, a sudden, unexplained shift in Amazon stock patterns. At first, analysts brushed it off, just another billionaire reshuffling assets, but then leaked documents surfaced. And what those papers revealed left Jeff Bezos furious, blindsided, and humiliated. According to these fictional accounts, Lauren Sánchez, the glamorous partner who had once been celebrated alongside Bezos, had allegedly moved more than $3 billion worth of his personal Amazon shares without his direct knowledge. Yes, you heard that right. Billions gone behind closed doors in silence. This wasn't just money, it was power control identity. Insiders whispered that Bezos felt his empire slipping through his hands. Imagine the scene late at night inside his Seattle estate, the glow of monitors lighting up the room, his financial team rushing in pale-faced and trembling over numbers they couldn't explain. Bezos staring frozen at the screen. $3 billion gone liquidated. One insider claimed he slammed the desk so hard the glass cracked, muttering over and over, "How could she do this? How could she do this to me for Bezos?" It wasn't only the money, it was betrayal at the deepest level. The woman he had defended lifted into his world, flown to space. At his side was now allegedly orchestrating his undoing. And worse, he didn't find out from her. He found out from a leak, a file delivered into the hands of his advisors. Humiliation, that's the word. Closest insiders kept repeating. Humiliation. On a scale the richest man in the world never expected hedge fund managers noticed it. First chunks of Amazon stock vanishing with no memo, no announcement, just disappearing into the night. At first they dismissed it, a rebalancing, a portfolio shift. But then came the tip off a mysterious envelope. No name. No return address delivered to a financial newsroom inside a single flash drive marked with Bezos' initials. Timestamps, codes. Analysts who opened the files gasped. The sales weren't random. They were coordinated, precise, and every sign pointed back to someone disturbingly close to him. Lauren Sánchez whispers grew that she hadn't stumbled into this, that it was planned for months, crafted with shadow advisors who understood the markets, someone who knew how to cover their tracks. One trader described it as corporate espionage. The moves too exact, like a military operation, invisible, unless you had the keys, and the question hung in the air. Why? Why would Lauren do this? Was it greed? Was it revenge? Was it power? Insiders claimed she was tired of being treated like the passenger in Bezos' empire. She wanted her own throne, and she wasn't going to ask for it. She was going to take it from whispers of secret meetings in luxury, hotels to encrypted calls bouncing through servers in Switzerland. The picture painted was darker than anyone imagined. One snippet of alleged audio captured her saying, "He thinks he owns everything, but he doesn't see me coming," chilling words. Words that turned a romance into a battlefield. And as Bezos' inner circle scrambled to piece together what had happened, one truth became clear. This was only the beginning. The night Jeff Bezos finally confronted Lauren Sánchez will go down as one of the most chilling moments in the fictional saga of billionaires and betrayal. The setting was his Lake Washington mansion, a fortress of glass and steel that suddenly felt like a cage. Bezos had been pacing the upper library for hours, his team whispering in corners, afraid to approach the man who built Amazon, now unraveling before their eyes finally closed to midnight. The heavy oak doors opened and Lauren stepped in. Wearing a sleek black dress, her face unreadable like a mask carved from marble, the air in the room felt electric, as though every piece of glass around them could shatter with one wrong word. Bezos didn't waste time. He held up the leaked flash drive, his hand trembling, the files that showed billions drained behind. His back and his voice cracked with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Tell me this isn't you, Lauren." His words echoed through the silent room, but she didn't flinch. She walked slowly to the bar, poured herself a drink, and said calmly, "You built a kingdom, Jeff? But you never noticed the cracks. You thought I was just a passenger. You were wrong." That sentence hung like a blade in the air. Bezos slammed the flash drive onto the table, his face red with fury. $3 billion, Lauren. $3 billion. Gone. Do you realize what you've done? But she didn't apologize. She didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice cold and steady. "I realized a long time ago that standing next to you meant disappearing into your shadow, every camera, Every article, every moment was Jeff Bezos and never me. I decided I wasn't going to live like that forever. Bezos staggered back as if she had struck him. The man who once conquered retail cloud space exploration now stood powerless in his own. Home One advisor hidden in the hallway later described hearing Bezos mutter almost to himself, "I gave you everything. The rockets, the parties, the spotlight." And Lauren laughed, but it wasn't joy. It was bitterness. "You didn't give me anything. Jeff, you let me borrow what was already yours, and when I wanted to make something mine, you never listened now. I've taken it and you can't stop me." The confrontation escalated as Bezos' voice rose for the first time. Insiders claimed his anger broke through his usual calm. He accused her of treachery, of corporate espionage, of destroying the trust that built his empire. But Lauren countered with venom of her own, accusing him of arrogance, of blindness, of building walls so high he couldn't see the people closest to him. One insider later leaked fragments of an alleged audio recording captured by hidden devices in the mansion, and the words shook the internet. He screamed, "You betrayed me," and she replied, "No, Jeff, I freed myself." Those words became the headline across tabloids and financial journals. Betrayal or freedom, depending on which side you chose. The audio then captured the sound of glass shattering as Bezos threw a decanter against the wall and footsteps as Lauren stormed out. But the story didn't end there, because moments later, another file leaked. This one, a video from the mansion's private surveillance system. Insiders whispered it showed Bezos collapsing into a chair, his hands covering his face, whispering over and over, "Not her, anyone but her." The world's richest man reduced to despair by the woman he thought he loved. But the deeper twist was still to come, because while Bezos reeled in shock, Lauren was already moving like a chess master, thinking 10 steps ahead. That very night, she boarded a private jet heading to Switzerland, where reports claimed she met with financial architects who helped her reroute the billions into offshore trusts. Encrypted accounts shielded from prying eyes. It wasn't random. It was precise, planned for months, maybe years. And as Bezos sat broken in Seattle, the financial world exploded. Hedge funds froze. Trades regulators demanded answers. Analysts called it the betrayal of the century, the biggest transfer of personal wealth ever seen without consent. Some even called it the corporate heist of the millennium. And yet, despite all the evidence, Bezos hesitated to move against her. Insiders said his team begged him to launch legal action to press charges, to crush her before the empire bled further. But he wavered, torn between rage and heartbreak, between the ruthless CEO instinct and the man who once told the world he had found love again. His hesitation gave Lauren time, and in that time, she grew. Stronger, more untouchable rumors spread of encrypted phone calls with foreign oligarchs, of whispered meetings in Venice, luxury hotels, of alliances forged in the shadows. People began to wonder, had Lauren Sánchez simply betrayed a lover, or had she orchestrated a coup against the richest man in the world? Meanwhile, Bezos found himself trapped. The media painted him as blind, humiliated. Weak questions swirled. Was this the beginning of his downfall? Was the Amazon empire vulnerable without his iron grip? Late-night hosts mocked him. Tabloids devoured him, and through it all, Lauren remained silent. Not a single word to the press. Her silence more powerful than any statement. Because every hour she stayed quiet, the world filled the gap. With darker theories, was she plotting to launch her own empire, to take over parts of Amazon through proxies, to expose secrets about Bezos? The speculation was endless, and in Seattle, Bezos spiraled further. He locked himself away, cut off from friends, allies, even family. One staffer whispered that he sat for hours in the dark, replaying the audio over and over, the words, "You never gave me anything." Jeff like a wound that wouldn't close, and yet deep inside, he knew this was only the first strike. Because betrayal on this scale was never about one move. It was about war. Lauren had drawn first blood, and now the question that haunted Bezos and the entire financial world was simple. What would she do next? The betrayal had already shaken the foundation of power, wealth, and reputation. But the story was only beginning to unfold, because when a secret of this magnitude escapes into the world, it does not travel quietly. It multiplies like fire spreading from one branch to another, touching everyone who had once believed they were immune to scandal. And for Jeff, the richest man alive, this was more than a personal crisis.
Thank you.
It was a war between image and reality, a collision of the carefully crafted persona of a genius entrepreneur who built rockets and global empires against the messy truth of human vulnerability, of love, entangled with desire of trust, shattered in the most public way possible. The revelation had not just broken his marriage, it had unleashed a storm that would test every alliance, every friendship, every partnership he had forged over decades of dominance. Themselves as something and if part one was about the cost of betrayal in numbers and lives, instead of part two was about the ripple effect, the chaos that refused to be contained. No longer whispered about because when a man at the top of the world stumbles under the bright lights of the fall is never his alone, and gala dinners. It drags entire institutions into the spiral. Tabloid drama now transformed. Imagine the scene in those first few weeks after the scandal broke. That image could be weaponized. Boardrooms filled with anxious whispers, investors pretending confidence, but silently calculating the damage, publicists scrambling with drafts of statements that would never see daylight because nothing sounded strong enough to shield against the raw humiliation of leaked messages, intimate words now dissected by strangers like forensic evidence. Beside him. Each headline more brutal than the last Jeff Bezos image that had not the titan but the betrayed husband. This was a Jeff Bezos, not the visionary, but the man whose private life had become global entertainment, and at the center of it, Lauren, a woman painted in extremes, adored by some, man on earth, vilified by others, celebrated as fearless, condemned as opportunistic. Choices became headlines. Everyone had an opinion, but nobody had the full truth, dissected by and that is where the danger, critics alike, lived in the spaces between fact and assumption, in the whispers that traveled faster than any rocket he could build. To show more the betrayal had cost him $38 billion to embrace, but what it truly cost was the sense of control, to step into because now he was no longer the narrator of his own story. The world was, because after and the world was merciless friends who once toasted with him at yachts and galas. Perhaps now hesitated to take his calls, or maybe allies in politics and media, weighed whether association was still worth the glare of scandal, unavoidable, and slowly even rivals like Elon watched from afar, not with sympathy, but calculation, measuring whether weakness had finally cracked open. A door competition could slip through and behind the curtain, risking reputation for romance. Lauren faced her own reckoning. The other half saw a man because though she had won the heart of the richest man alive, Lauren herself she had also inherited the wrath of those who believed she was the reason an empire was bleeding. Billions gossip magazines painted her as the femme fatale. Tabloids turned her into a caricature. She had ambition, a woman. She had strategy. Whose love was too costly, whose ambition was too bold. But if you looked closer, if you silenced the noise, there was something more complex. As a woman who had lived her entire life on the edges of fame, who knew the taste of struggle, who had always been near power, but never fully inside it, now suddenly thrust into a spotlight so blinding it could burn through skin and soul alike. And while Jeff fought to salvage his empire, Lauren fought to prove she was not just a headline, not just a scandal, but a partner, a presence, a force in her own right. The tension between love and reputation, between survival and ambition grew thicker each day. And yet through it all, they stayed together. Because sometimes the world does not understand the logic. Lauren spoke of hearts that beat against reason. Women and young sometimes two people find in each other not salvation, but defiance. And what followed was not retreat, but escalation. And while instead of disappearing, Jeff and Lauren leaned into the spectacle, stepping onto red carpets, arriving at events, smiling at cameras as though daring the world to keep talking. And of course, the world did each appearance, analyzed frame by frame, her jewelry, his posture, their glances as if decoding a mystery. But what no one could see was the quiet strategy unfolding behind those smiles, the moves being played not just in public, but in private negotiations, legal maneuvering billion-dollar decisions that would reshape not only their lives, but the very companies Jeff had built. And while gossip filled the headlines inside those rooms, the real war was underway. Allies had to be reassured, and into love employees needed confidence, shareholders demanded explanations, and every decision carried double weight because now nothing was judged only. By its merit, everything was filtered through the lens of scandal. Even a rocket launch became not just about science, but about distraction. About reclaiming the narrative, about proving to the world that the man humiliated in love was still untouchable. In vision. But the question that haunted Jeff in the late hours, when the noise quieted and the crowds disappeared, was simple. If betrayal could destroy the illusion of control, once could it happen again? Could he ever truly trust anyone fully? And that fear, that lingering shadow, followed him more ruthlessly than any journalist ever could. Because betrayal, when it comes from within, leaves scars that no wealth can erase. And the story of part 2 was the story of a man trying to rebuild not just fortune, but faith. Trying to love while carrying the memory of loss. Trying to conquer the world while knowing that even the strongest can bleed. And the deeper this saga unfolded, the more it became clear that this was not just about two people. This was about the fragility of power, the price of love at the highest stakes, and the question of whether even the richest man alive could ever win against the one force no one controls: the human heart. After the betrayal, after the storm of headlines, after the judgmental whispers of a world that had been handed the most intimate fragments of their private lives, Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sánchez found themselves standing at the edge of a precipice, where they could either fall apart and let the chaos consume them, or cling tightly to each other and carve out a new path of resilience, redemption, and love for weeks. The media dissected every detail of their story, painting Jeff as the man who had it all yet lost control, and Lauren as the woman who stood at the center of scandal, but behind closed doors, away from the paparazzi flashes and the screaming tabloid covers, there was a quieter, more fragile truth. Jeff and Lauren were talking. They were listening. They were asking each other whether trust could be rebuilt after such a public implosion. Lauren, who had been painted as everything from femme fatale to opportunist, sat across from Jeff in the stillness of private rooms and told him that her feelings were not built on his billions, not built on his empire, but on the man she had seen when the cameras were gone. The man who looked for wonder in rockets and books and dreams. Jeff, who had endured not only the collapse of his marriage, but also the sneers of a public that thought his new relationship was doomed, questioned whether love could survive such scrutiny. But every time Lauren reached for his hand, he felt that maybe it could, maybe it should, and maybe it had to, because what they shared was now bigger than both of them. In the months that followed, Jeff began leaning on Lauren as not just a partner in romance, but as a confidant, as someone who could steady him when the boardrooms became war zones. And when the headlines cut too deeply, they started rebuilding slowly, brick by brick, day by day. Date nights away from the noise, dinners on quiet terraces, flights to places where anonymity was still possible, where they could walk without being judged for every glance or gesture. Each small moment became an act of defiance against the narrative the world had written for them. Lauren encouraged Jeff to open up emotionally, something he had not been accustomed to doing as a man who had built walls to survive the pressures of wealth and leadership. She reminded him that vulnerability was not weakness but strength. And Jeff in turn showed her that love could exist without apology, without shame, without fear of the critics they went to. Space launches together. Lauren beaming at the sight of Jeff's childlike wonder whenever a rocket kissed the sky, and Jeff whispering that she gave him a gravity he had never known before when his own company Blue Origin became the subject of criticism. Lauren stood beside him unshaken, reminding him that the pursuit of exploration would always be mocked before it was celebrated. And when Lauren faced her own wave of online hate labeled and mischaracterized, Jeff reminded her that history would remember courage, not gossip, together. They started rewriting their own story, not in the pages of newspapers, but in the small acts of loyalty they shared. Lauren introduced Jeff to her children carefully, cautiously, wanting them to see the man she loved beyond the caricature painted by tabloids. Jeff embraced the role gently, knowing trust from children is earned, not demanded. And as time passed, those bonds deepened until family gatherings began to feel less like an experiment and more like a new home forming. They traveled not just to luxury destinations, but to causes that mattered. They supported climate initiatives, women's empowerment, and education, weaving their romance with a sense of purpose that critics could not easily dismiss. It was not perfect. The ghosts of betrayal lingered. The doubts sometimes resurfaced, but every challenge became another test. They refused to fail. Jeff would look at Lauren sometimes across a crowded gala or in the silence of their private yacht and think about how easily he could have lost this if he had let shame or anger drive him away. And Lauren would look at him and think about the courage it took for a man who once controlled everything to admit he needed someone. Not for business, not for empire, but for heart. Slowly, the world began to shift. The very tabloids that had once shredded them started to pivot, covering their appearances as power couple moments instead of scandals. Every red carpet, every philanthropic donation, every whisper of wedding bells reframed them not as broken, but as unbreakable friends who had doubted them, admitted privately that the bond seemed real and perhaps stronger because it had been tested by fire. For Jeff, the rebuilding of his relationship with Lauren was also the rebuilding of himself. He was no longer just the CEO. No longer just the world's richest man. Framed as a battle over he was a man who had been stripped bare by betrayal and yet had chosen to rebuild with love Lauren for her. Jeff Bezos Hart found herself evolving too. Billionaire caught in she was no longer just the glamorous media personality, but a woman who had weathered storms, stood in the crossfire of global judgment, others mocked him and still found joy in love and in family. Spiral into global drama. Together they carved out rituals morning, coffees by the ocean, handwritten notes tucked into travel bags. It was not loud, evenings spent dreaming of futures yet to be written in those rituals. 2019, they found strength in those rituals. They found healing in those rituals. They discovered that rebuilding a relationship was not about erasing the past, but about choosing every single day to write a better chapter than the one before. Sharply with the chaos, and as they did, the world kept watching, some rooting for their downfall, and Lauren's others secretly hoping they would succeed. Shorthand for betrayal. But for Jeff, Mackenzie chose silence, and later Lauren, none of that mattered anymore. Redirecting billions. What mattered was that against all odds, they were still here together and stronger than ever. To one of the after scandal, heartbreak, and betrayal, Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sánchez rebuilt not only their love, but their image. Came out stronger from this chaos. What began as doubt soon transformed into resilience, reinvention, and influence. A new legacy for herself. Every ring, every yacht, every public appearance became more than romance. It was a statement of status and power. The infamous oval diamond ring, said to be over 30 carats, was no mere jewel. It was a declaration that Lauren's place beside Jeff was permanent. And in doing so, and when Jeff later gifted her a rare pink diamond, one of the scarcest stones in the world, it argued she truly loved Jeff. Silenced even the harshest critics. Undeniable in every their love was now expressed in symbols of grandeur that few could rival. The war over perception beyond diamonds for Jeff. Their $500 million super yacht turned the Mediterranean into their stage. Strategic a floating kingdom where power, beauty, and influence converged. Shareholders feared distraction. Scandal was replaced with spectacle. Betrayal was overwritten by abundance. Differently. The richest man alive, now beneath the glitter, they were building something deeper. A power couple whose reach stretched into politics, media, aerospace, and philanthropy.
In a world of abundance.
Lauren's media savvy matched Jeff's billions. Together, they mastered the art of turning gossip into spotlight, criticism into influence, and scandal into legacy. Their story is no longer about infidelity. It is about adaptation, resilience, and reinvention. They proved that in the age of billionaires, love itself becomes a performance for the world. Yet behind the spectacle lies something unshakable. A bond built on forgiveness, strength, and the courage to choose each other again and again. In the end, Jeff and Lauren are not defined by scandal, wealth, or diamonds, but by the rarest treasure of all, the courage to love without apology.
This video covers legal allegations in a news context. All claims are from official filings and no guilt is implied until proven in court, please. Keep all discussions respectful. Allegations are not facts until proven in court.